today's going to be quite an interesting day. What we're trying to do is basically, shed light on business rescue. We'll try and keep technical jargon away so that we can basically include as many people as possible in this engagement. So today the whole idea is basically to give you some insights in terms of what business rescue is, what it entails, and how do we go about it. We've gotten some great speakers and experienced individuals who understand business rescue and what it involves. We have the grandfather of business rescue, the man without any hair sitting in front there, Felix Addo. Do you want to stand up? So Felix, for those of you who don't know, is the president of Garia. Garia is really his vision, which was created whilst he was the country senior partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. So we're going to hear from Julius Ayevo. He's a senior manager with KPMG. Julius has a wealth of experience in business rescue. He is a certified trainer of the IFC insolvency train-the-trainer course. He's going to be speaking on the issues. He'll provide more detailed information with regards to the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Act, which basically is our point of reference for business rescue in Ghana. Julius will also give us case studies of successful and maybe unsuccessful business rescues. He will be able to synthesize some of the points that came out of, a reflection on these case studies. We will also hear from Julius. Do you want to stand up so that everybody can see you? He also hasn't got hair on his head as well. We'll also hear from Prosper. Prosper Melome is a partner at Bridgewater. He is an investment banker. He has done a lot of debt restructuring, so he will take us through, the business life cycle and how our exposure, how the businesses get exposed to debt. And he will introduce the concepts of, corporate stress right through to distress and basically collapse. Sorry, Prosper, do you want to stand up? I forgot. He's got a bit of hair, but yeah. I'm about the only one who seems to have hair on the team. Yeah. We'll also hear from Dr. Samoa. Dr. Samoa is a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana, very experienced. He did his PhD at Witwatersrand University in South Africa. He has won a number of prizes with journals, academic journals. He will take us through, the general restructuring process so that you have an overview of what it entails. Thank you very much. I will now ask Felix to come and say a few words. Thank you.
Good morning, all. On behalf of the Governing Council and the Honorary Council of Garia, let me welcome you all to this couple days of intensive training on business restructuring. It's refreshing to see some of my colleagues here, the old faces, and also to see some of the new ones here. In the next couple of days, we're going to learn a bit more about how best we can together make this field of restructuring a success, especially in the times we are in this country. The last report we got from the IMF indicated that Ghana is growing at, or is projected to grow this year at 1.16. Now this is a revision from the previous forecast they had in April of 1.5. All right. You all know about the inflation figures because you feel it, you live it. It's supposed to be coming down from the 38.1 we are currently at. Again, the word IMF forecast that it will decline to about 31.3 at the end of the year, with an average for the whole year of about 40-some%, which is not very encouraging. But if you recall, last year around December we were trotting at about 54 plus. So progress is being made. Okay. Now, we haven't had a session like this since, I guess we had our IP induction in March of this year. Okay. You recall at that session we inducted about 154 of you into the IP fraternities. So currently we have about 250 certified IEPs. And these are the professionals who can carry on receiverships, liquidations, restructuring, and the like. Any other person who behaves or acts as one of you IPs, it's on summary conviction, goes to jail for 2 to 5 years, plus about 1,000 penalty units in fine. So it's a very prestigious accreditation you all have. You have to cherish it. Okay. And make sure that the new profession of IPs is something to be very proud of. It's selective, but you have to earn it. Remember, we had to induct, we grandfathered some of you into the profession. The real work has now started, and we have to behave at and give restructuring advice, give liquidation advice, give whatever advices we need to give to our clients professionally, as we ourselves also are liable. Okay, I'm not sure we go to jail yet, but we will be liable for all manner of sanctions under the law. Okay. We have currently about 500 members in Garia, and about half are accredited as IPs. Okay. Since the beginning of the year, you haven't heard too much in terms of workshops, master classes, and the like, because we've been focusing on our internal structures. And I'm happy to report that we've made significant progress. Okay. We have developed a governance training scheme for savings and loan institutions under the auspices of the Bank of Ghana, BSD. And so Garia will be able to offer that training, focusing on corporate governance, because part of our remit is making sure that companies are governed properly and they don't get into distress situations. We also have been working in signing up MOUs with our sister institutions. And our critical institutions, the Ghana Bar Association and also the Institute of Chartered Accountants. Okay? Between the lawyers, the accountants, and the bankers. Why do I miss out the bankers? Between the lawyers, the bankers, the Institute of Bankers, and those are three component elements of Garia. Okay. So it's like an apex above those professional groups. Okay. And we've gotten the MOU with the lawyers, that's the Ghana Bar Association. We are in advanced stages with the Institute of Chartered Accountants. One critical element of what Garia has been doing is getting the Garia Association. Currently, we are an association, professional association. We're also licensed under the Companies Limited by Guarantee Act. Okay, that's Companies Act 2019, 992. But we are trying to get ourselves chartered so that we'll be the Chartered Institute of Restructuring and Insolvency Practitioners. So, we have a little window to get Parliament to pass this law this year. The budget will be read on November 15th. And once the budget is read, Parliament goes into full budgetary review mode till they rise sometime in December. And so between now and November 15, we have to work assiduously with the Constitutional Parliamentary Affairs Legal Committee of Parliament to be able to get our bill reviewed. Okay. So, Judge is busy telling me that I've run out of time, but I thought I had 30 minutes on your program. Anyway, let me wrap up. Again, let me welcome you all to this session. I see a lot of good, I think about 150 or so have signed up for this next 2 days. And I see a lot of solid institutions who want to get a handle on business rescue, and you won't be disappointed. Okay. All right, on that note, George, let me hand it over back to you, and let's have a couple days of very good interactive sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Felix. Now I would like to ask Julius Ayevo to come to the podium and do some magic. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Okay, so I will not bore you with too much introductions. That has already been done. Haircuts. Anytime I hear haircuts, I remember two things. The first, my own hair, and then secondly, business rescue. Because haircuts are a very important part of business turnarounds. When you have a company that is that has a debt overhang, or that has a huge debt burden, haircuts are definitely not things you can gloss over. They are as important as looking at the entire business and then restructuring its operations. Today, I will look at three different aspects of this subject. My outline is first of all to look at insolvency and restructuring strategies. I would focus a bit more on what Sarah says, because the focus of our discussion this week would be around that. I would then move on to look at the governance and accountability in business restructuring or business rescue. Then some success stories. I have a company in Ghana and then two companies in South Africa that have successfully restructured. It depends on how you say it, but I can make an argument that the business rescue was successful in these three examples. Then I would remind you about my key points, things that you shouldn't forget, if at all you forget anything. Are we happy with the outline? Okay. As much as possible, this room is full of deep experience, people who understand this subject to its core. So as much as possible, we like to make it very interactive. You can stop me at any time, ask a question, contribute, give your own perspectives on whatever it is that you want to talk about. Okay, insolvency and restructuring strategies. For the benefit of those who are not accountants, also spend a little time just to explain some of the concepts, to break it down a bit. Because sometimes we are very quick to think that everybody understands some of this terminology. So I'll spend a little time to explain those concepts as well. I would look at, for the strategies, look at what a business that is distressed can do to turn around by itself without recourse to what the law says, as in the law on restructuring on one side, and then move on to focus on the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Act. What is a solvent company? What is a solvent company? Who wants to explain? It's on the slide, but who wants to explain? Yes, sir.
Well, you have clearly stated it here that when the total assets of the company is greater than the total liabilities, excluding equity.
Thank you very much, sir.
There is a hard test, which is whether the company is able to meet these obligations in the 1 year ahead, and they have solid assets to cover these obligations.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much. So, for non-accountants, companies will have a balance sheet. A balance sheet will be made up of your assets, liabilities, and equity. And the way I try to explain this is to say, think about a company that starts operation today. And all the company has is the money that was invested by the shareholder or the owner of the company today. So when that shareholder brings that money into the company, it comes into the company as an asset because it's a resource for the company. Then it also sits in another half of the balance sheet as what we call equity. As companies grow, the capital that is invested by the shareholders may not be enough to embark on the projects that the company intends to embark on. So they would maybe go into the market and source additional funding. So where they go and talk to banks, they go and talk to people like my friend to raise funding. Okay. Now when funding is raised, it comes onto the books of the company as a liability because the company has to repay those monies. So it comes to the other half of the balance sheet as a liability, and then to the top also as an asset because once you raise funding, money comes into the business as a resource, and then there is a liability or there's an obligation on the company to repay the amount that it borrows. So on the balance sheet, as I indicated, you have assets, liabilities, equity. Let's leave equity and put equity on the side and compare what the total assets of a company is to the company's total liabilities. When the total assets, as my senior brother has explained, exceeds the total liabilities of the company, we say the company is solvent. That's a good company. That is a healthy company. And I can say without mincing words that we are all solvent, because if you are insolvent, you won't be here. So that's a healthy company. So that's a company that is breathing healthy. Okay. My senior brother provided a different perspective to talk about, the company being able to meet its maturing obligations as and when they fall due. Those I will look at from a current, perspective to say in the next 1 year, do you have enough resources to be able to pay your liabilities as and when they fall due or not? But for the purpose of determining solvency, I will look at it from a global perspective, total assets, total liabilities. One that exceeds the total liabilities, you are good to go. Now, what are the characteristics of a solvent company? I gave examples in my initial submission. What are the characteristics of a solvent company? They are all right here on the slide. The first one I want to talk about is positive cash flow. It's very important for us to understand these things because these principles will dovetail nicely into the discussions when we go into insolvency. Positive cash flow. A company exists to earn money and to spend money. I'll put it as basic as that. To earn and to spend. Whichever way you look at it. When a company earns money, it's an inflow of cash, right? When it spends, it's an outflow of cash. When you earn more than you spend, then you are good. If you spend more than you earn, like some of us do, then it is bad. Okay. Or it may cause problems. So you would typically note that a company would generate cash. Yeah, I'm talking about cash flow. So cash flow is cash flow, as in cash, through its operating activities. So if the company is in the business of construction, it undertakes contracts and then gets paid. If the company is in the business of buying and selling, it sells and gets paid. Then the company can also generate cash from going into the market and then sourcing funding from a bank. So that is from a financing aspect. Okay. Then of course the company can also generate cash from investing. So as you invest, you put in money, you're supposed to get some returns back. When you combine all these and there is a positive inflow, then we say sorry. Okay, perfect. You have a positive cash flow. So when the company has a positive cash flow, they can be smiling. The flip side is what? True. And I always use, you can use you as an example. When you don't have money in your pocket, it can be very stressful. Very, very stressful, especially getting to the end of the month. Very stressful. If you don't take time, you can even swallow your kids if they dare come and ask for a gift at the end of the month. Think about it that way. Then low debt levels. A solvent company will have low debt levels. Debt can be very burdensome. Debt is like a weight. When your debt levels are low as a company, the tendency that you are a healthy company is very high. When I look at the company's balance sheet, okay, even if I don't check its solvent nature, I just go to the liabilities and see what kind of liabilities does this company have. If these are liabilities that would cause huge interest payments to be made, that company is in trouble. When the company has low debt levels, it is definitely solvent. When looked at in comparison with the asset levels of the company. Healthy balance sheet. I think I've explained that, right? Healthy balance sheet. How do you know a company's balance sheet is healthy? When you have a company that is owned by one man, okay, who at every point in time takes money out of the company and then gets them to record that amount as other assets. Other assets. So you can have a company that looks solvent because the total assets exceeds the total liabilities, but when you look at the other asset line, it's so huge. Trust me, that money ain't going to come back. So I will still conclude that that company doesn't have a sound balance sheet or healthy balance sheet. Strong liquidity. Liquidity is key, and the banks and the bankers here will explain to you how important liquidity is. Liquidity is cash or assets of the company that can be converted into known amounts of cash easily. if I want to explain it to you simply. So for instance, if you want to determine a company's liquidity, you look at its current assets. The current assets will be assets that you can turn around to generate an inflow of cash in the next 1 year, in a short while. So you can have things like, of course, the basic one is money, the one in your wallet or the one in your purse. Then you can have things like government securities, 91-day T-bills. And these days, I will touch on that. These days, we are giving government money like crazy. Why? Because the market is down, it's a bit down, and nobody's sure where to put their monies. You have a lot of money, but you don't know where to put it. So the safest unsafe place is government. So government securities are convertible to known amount of cash, especially if it's 91 day or even 182 days. So those are cash equivalents, if I want to put it that way, and so on and so forth. So if you looked at all those assets and you compare to the company's obligations in the next 1 year, if those exceed the obligations, we say the company is liquid. Liquidity is key for every company. Very, very, very key. You can have a whole plant that makes your balance sheet look robust. But if you don't have money to operate the plant, you are illiquid. And that is a serious problem. It's a recipe for disaster. And you can ask even the bankers, before a bank will give out a loan to a company, they want to be sure that the company will be able to pay those loans, to be able to generate cash, to be able to pay those obligations. If they are not sure, they will not give you the loan. So the liquidity is very, very key for a solvent company. Growing revenue, not static, growing revenue, top line, which would also affect bottom line at the end of the day when your cost is kept at reasonable levels. So when a company has growing revenue, so you start operations this year, you make a revenue of 1,000 Ghana cedi. Next year, it increases to 1,500. The following year to 2,000, 2,500, 100,000. Then we are saying you are growing, right? So you are generating income. But if first year you made 100,000 revenue, next year 90, following year 80, fourth year 20. Nobody should tell you that probably this is not a viable business. That is a dwindling what? Revenue. So when a company has growing revenue, it is, all these things here are rebuttable. You can rebut them because to be able to make a determination, you must look at all of them in concert. Okay. Steady profitability. Steady profitability. Steady profitability. When your revenue grows and your cost grows with it, of course, that is what will be expected because you need to spend to be able to generate. So the expectation that when your revenue grows, costs will also grow, maybe commensurate, max. All right. Auditors, when they are auditing and they see that your revenue is growing but your cost is going down, you are telling them that they should look at those numbers very, very well because it doesn't make sense. When your revenue is growing, your cost is also growing, somewhat commensurately. It makes sense because you need to incur to generate. So by the end of the day, when you look at the profitability of the company and it is increasing at a steady, pace, that company is likely to be solvent, or is likely to be healthy, let me put it that way. The seventh one is positive stakeholder relationship. What are the stakeholders of a company? 1, staff. 2, regulators. If the company is in an environment that is highly regulated, so a bank, for instance, you have Bank of Ghana. 3, you can have lenders, suppliers, debtors. These are all stakeholders. They all work in concert to ensure the sustainability of a company or to ensure the success of a company. If a company has a good relationship with this, and of course shareholders, if a company has a good relationship with all these people, the tendency that the company can be said to be solvent or to be in a position of solvency is high. You can imagine having trouble with your debtors, trouble with your suppliers. They'll just cut the supply. You see, once they cut the supply, operations will halt. So can you imagine being a company that depends heavily on a sole supplier for your raw materials? And then you decide to insult the owner of the company that he doesn't have hair. That will be your end. Because when it cuts the supply, where else are you going to get the raw materials to produce? You get it? So stakeholder engagement is part of any company's activities to ensure that there is success at the end of the day. We'll go a little deep into some of these things when we start looking at then effective cost control. Effective cost control. Effective cost control. When a company looks at its cost line, what does it see? Are you just spending because you have to spend, or you are spending because it's a necessity, or it is a necessary thing for you to spend? Because remember, I have this at the back of my mind. When you are spending, there must be an almost commensurate benefit for the company. You cannot be spending without getting the benefits. If you are spending and you are not getting the benefit, it's time to stop spending. You don't agree? It's normal. If I'm spending on this, my friend here, and we have an agreement, don't go there. We have an agreement and she's not performing, can I continue to spend? No. So businesses have to start thinking in that light, that when you spend, there must be a commensurate benefit to you. Either from a top line or a bottom line perspective. If I say top line, I'm talking about revenue. Bottom line is profit. So there must be processes and policies and structures within that company to ensure that cost is minimized and cost is optimized. That's the optimization of cost. It means that when you spend, you should get more than the amount you spend. And of course, you also minimize the cost. I'm not saying you should go and tighten the salaries you pay your staff. That one, don't do that. It's part of stakeholder relationship. If you tighten their salaries, that will be bad for the business. They'll just dissipate your assets anyhow. If happy staff produce happy results. I've heard of a story of a company that pays itself so well that it's just too good to be true. It's a company in the US. And the maxim or the general understanding is that when you tighten cost from maybe compensation perspective, you're saving. Sometimes it may not be true. When you pay your staff well, they will give off their best. When they have to wake up and get to the office at 5:30 to work, they will do that without any hesitation. They will work for you as if the company was theirs. It's very true. You after this you can come and give me your tithe for this good advice. Okay, so 8 characteristics. Now let's zoom into an insolvent company. The flip side is true. Flip side is true. When the liabilities of a company exceed its total assets, the company is insolvent. You don't have to even think about it. It's just calculator. Total assets minus total liabilities, negative number, insolvent. Does it even make sense how you can owe more than you have? It does. When a company's liabilities are in excess of its assets, it has a negative net worth. It's the shareholders that will suffer. It means that their capital is eroded totally. That is, of course, that is if. Yeah. So, you see the man there. You know, when I was preparing this slide, I went to look for a picture of a macho man with a heavy, how do you call that thing? The one that you carry. Those who do the weight. The guy was not able to carry the weight. But my friend Eunice said, no, that one is not good. Let's use this one. Because this one depicts the picture of someone with a heavy weight. And what's that weight? Liabilities. Liabilities in themselves may not be bad if those monies are invested properly to generate returns. But it is bad if those monies are not invested but are what? Consumed. An example is Ghana. Can you imagine going for a loan to do a wedding? People do that. Or going for a loan to organize a grand party in your house. That is not a wise investment decision. Because your friends come and blow all the money, all the drinks, the food, and leave you in debt. But if you had gone for that money to invest in a building or to invest in a business that can generate income to pay the debt, that's a wise decision. What are 5 signs of a business in distress? Anyone with any views, share views, let's make it interactive. Anything I've said, if you disagree, please share your views. This room is full of experience and we would like to hear everybody. Yes, so my brother at the back.
Hi, Julius.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The characteristics that we've just spoken about, how many of them are you supposed to see before you say it is insolvent or it is solvent? Should you see all the 8 characteristics? Or thank you.
Okay. No, that's a very good question. Who has an answer? Who can give us a response? Okay.
Yeah, it boils down to the impact of each of these variables on liquidity. So the dominant factors would definitely have impact on the cash base or liquidity of the company in question. Some may not be relevant for, or would I use a proper word, may not have that level of negative impact to the company in question. So all in all, you would assess those that have quite significant impact on the company before you take a decision.
Yeah, thank you very much. So there is no hard and fast rule about this. The situation of every company will be different. In fact, you can just one factor in here, just one characteristic here can result in the conclusion that the company is insolvent, or a combination of factors. So my direct answer to that question is that it depends. It depends. That assessment has to be done on company by company basis. Okay. Any more questions
Yes,
or contributions?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Please, I'm a quarter justice.
Justice.
With regards to the cash flow, are we talking of the historical or the forecasted? And if it's the forecasted, then of course the assumptions. How are we going to test the assumptions? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So, in assessing solvency, I would look at the position balance, all right? Because you are making a determination whether the company is healthy. Yes, projections can help make an informed conclusion based on the cash flows that you estimate that the company will get in the future. But I would look at the balance sheet of the company as at the day, as at a particular date or a reference date in mind. I don't know whether that answers the question. It answers the question. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Assuming I'm a banker and I'm going to learn what has happened in the past is historical.
Yeah.
That will not matter to me. What is going to matter to me for the repayment is going forward.
Yes.
That's why the forecasted one will be critical to me and not the historical.
Yes.
Although,
yes.
like you said, the historical is going to assist you to make a determination as to either, as of now, the company is solvent. The what of going forward, because the repayment is going to come from the going forward and not what has happened in the past.
Excellent, excellent. That is very, very, very true. The past is always a precursor to the future. So as a bank, to lend, you want to know that the company will be able to pay. So whatever cash flows, projections they give you, you also have a responsibility to test that the assumptions make sense. If the assumptions don't make sense by reference to the past, then you have a question to answer whether or not this loan must be given to the customer. So I agree with you 100%. Okay, my time is up. So I would like to invite George to give us a comment before we go for break.
Thank you, Julius. Wonderful presentation. Solvency is a big thing. It's very conceptual as well. It depends on whether your assets are tangible or intangible, you know, and we can argue the case where we only have intangible assets and therefore we're still solvent, but that's another discussion. I've got with me, just before we go for tea break, I've got with me GIPC, Victoria Koba. She is from the Business Recovery Unit of GIPC. And I know there's some amongst you who would be interested in understanding the Business Recovery Unit and what they do. So I'll just ask Victoria to come and say a few words to you before the tea break. Victoria.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It will indeed be a few words. What I want to say is that we're actually from the aftercare division, and our mission really is to facilitate the retention of business, investor business in Ghana, and also reinvestment. So basically anything that is a bottleneck for business growth or business expansion, we try to facilitate for things to go on for business, and it's really based on government conduct. So most of what we do is building relationships with government ministries, departments, and agencies, and liaising when investors have issues. So basically we just want to prevent a business from going under. And we're working on a project that's being funded by World Bank, Investor Grievance Mechanism. We're trying to move the aftercare services a notch higher to preempt issues and challenges that will cause a business to divest. So that is before it becomes litigation or before Ghana gets dragged into international arbitration or something like that. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. I'd like to just use this opportunity to mention a few people. We've got Pan-African Mining, Ghana. We've got the Bank of Ghana. We've got quite a large team from the Bank of Ghana. CBG. We've also got ENS Africa, GCB, Ferocity Chambers. We've also got the senior partner from Bene, Prempe and Company. We'll call out the others as we go through. Julius hasn't finished his sessions. We'll come back to him. Thank you.
All right, so I have to go ahead to proceed. So this is where we got off. We got off somewhere here. I've got this slide. I've already explained this. I've got this other slide. It's self-explanatory. I don't have enough time, so I don't want George to come and sack me off the podium. So I want to just rush through some of the things. And I've got these restructuring strategies. Two things. There are general approaches to restructuring a distressed business. And then there is an approach, or there are approaches contemplated in law. So that's how I'm going to explain it. So there is currently an Insolvency Act, Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Act, that has been passed that is supposed to help businesses restructure. But then, before a business even contemplates the legal approach to restructuring, that business can decide to take internal steps to restructure. Please, is that okay? Okay, so the strategies on here are those instances. And please don't forget that, as I indicated, the specific circumstances of companies differ. Thus, the approach that would be used to restructure a business would also differ from another business. That is why it's important to consult. And we have so many IPs here with a lot of experience to help businesses do so. Not just from a legal perspective, but from a general restructuring of a business perspective. The first approach I would like to look at is mergers. I'll just touch on them briefly. So what's a merger? From the word, it's an English word, merger. Put two businesses together, right? There is a horizontal, there is vertical. Horizontal is where you look at a business that is on the same level with you in terms of product and services. You identify that business as a business that you can partner with to move your corporate objective forward. You go into a negotiation with that business and then you guys come together. It happens a lot. Unfortunately, in this part of our world, we are always interested in moving in silos. So we tend to have so many SMEs, right? Small, medium-sized entities. It shouldn't be that way. Can you just imagine if we had businesses, robust, strong business, a few robust, strong businesses, they will do better than the small ones that we have. So there is much room for mergers to happen in this part of the world. Horizontal, so I've explained horizontal, so where you can merge with a competitor. Vertical could be, in a sense, where you want to, so it could be operational. That could even be operational. So where an example would be you identify a supplier, that you can, consolidate or merge with. Okay, so you don't have to go outside to source those supplies, especially when it comes to, raw materials. So you find that a lot in companies that run, beverage businesses. So for instance, if you pick the company like Blue Skies started off a few years back, depending on supplies by individual farmers or companies. Mangoes, you do mango juice, mangoes, pineapple, and stuff like that. But now they've got farms. They've got farms, and they've merged with some of these entities, or they formed an alliance with some of these entities to make the process a bit more seamless. You know why? It's important. Why? Because if you are very heavy on one particular supplier and the supplier fails, your business fails. To ensure that you protect that, you can be in control instead of the supplier being what? Being in control. And this would happen through negotiations. Demerger. The opposite of merger, right? So you can decide to separate. Because they say one bad nut spoils what? Oh, you don't know that down. One bad nut spoils the whole soup. So you can take the bad nut out. The soup will still taste a bit. It won't be that bad. You understand? So demergers are important. In some instances, it's a restructuring strategy to separate from, it could be a division. All right, a division of the company that is so heavy on cost. It's a cost center. And you're not even seeing what that business, that division is adding to your corporate strategy. Why do you want to keep that division? Let it go. Let the side chicks go. You get it. So it's the same. It's demerger. Let them go. When they go, you can focus on the important one. And when you focus, you are sure to make inroads. But when there are too many of them around, it's not very... Equity infusion. So this one is from a shareholder perspective, all right? So you can go back to the shareholder to add more money, to bring in more money. Or you can actually go into the market to source additional equity. Okay, and there are very, easy ways, not easy like that, ways of doing it. Prosper understands these things very, very keenly. The only thing that happens, the only challenge when it comes to equity infusion where you're going externally is the fear of dilution. Fear of dilution. People don't want to share, but they want to. Sometimes you must give to gain. And when you look at strategic alliances, I can explain the strategic alliances and then equity infusion together, because you can identify a strategic partner that can decide to give you equity. That strategic partner has experience, technical expertise, knowledge, has done the business over and over and over again in a bigger market. So why not? Why do you want to be in your own small corner and doing your own small things your own way, which is not giving you the results? We fear alliances, so that takes me to alliances. Okay, we fear those because of, all kinds of things. But it shouldn't be. I'll speak about debt restructuring last. Then, debt for equity swaps. And this one, it's a low-hanging fruit in some instances. You have a company that has a debt overhang. people, it owes people, let's say maybe a private lender or a finance house or a supplier, okay, that the company owes heavily. What stops you from engaging to say, hey, why don't you give part of your debt for a stake in the company? Do you know what does? Two things. It will dilute your shares, but it will also give you some debt reprieve. Which one do you prefer? The other one, isn't it? Debt reprieve for a bit of your shares. But of course, valuations will come in. It has to be valued properly and all that. And those will be technical things that can be looked at. So debt for equity swaps are also ways of restructuring a business. So you can see that all the things I'm saying are pointing to something. Debt, 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 debt. It's only operational restructuring that may fall outside of that a bit. See, so operations. How does the company operate efficiently and effectively? Efficiency is very important. It's not just about doing, but doing efficiently with less resources to get optimum results. So efficiency is very, very, very key when it comes to the operations of business. If you are a business that is not efficient, you'll be throwing money away. You have all kinds of units with all kinds of people. They come to the office, cross their legs, watch Facebook. Or you have, some asset that is lying idle. Assets are not supposed to be idle. They are supposed to generate income because you bought them. It's an investment. So if the asset is lying idle, not generating income, that one to an asset, your guess is as good as mine. So efficiency is key. Are the processes in the business properly documented so that anyone that comes in understands that this has to be done before that, before that, before that, before that? Or we're just doing haphazardly. Anything goes. Everybody brings their idea, or we just do and go. Mr. Ado made, when he was giving his opening remarks, he spoke about the fact that we've not had a lot of these engagements recently because they are taking time off to develop a structure. I'm sure that will include processes, internally. How do we move this institution forward? You must do the inward before you do the outward. It's important. Or else, when you do the outward before the inward, you're not getting any. So it's a very important aspect of what? Of a business. Disinvestment. I was speaking about that. Disinvestment. If the investment is not viable, disinvest. Sell. Get someone who is interested to buy. It's not very easy. You may have to get a haircut on that investment. I know somebody that has a lot of government securities. And in this day and age of haircuts, if you go to the market to sell, they'll give you uppercut. No, because nobody is interested in the security you're holding. Okay? So is it a good time to sell, or you want to hold on to it and then you get it? So this investment may be applicable in some instances, but not applicable in other instances. It depends on what you're interested in. Okay. Takeovers. Okay. Then debt restructuring. The bankers know these things better than me. Debt restructuring. When a company is in debt, you don't have a choice than to go back to the creditor to ask for some reprieve. It could be in form of moratorium on interest, or extension of the period of repayment, or actual haircut on the amount that you owe. You see, these are all, that's why relationship, I spoke about stakeholder engagement. It's very important. If you have a good relationship with your creditors, you can go back to them and say, hey, Charlie, I'm struggling, help me. But if you don't, it will be difficult. There's a bit more to that, but let me just end it here. Any question or contribution before I proceed to the next phase of my... So this is my last slide. This is the last slide for the first one. Okay, before I move into... Any questions or contributions? Okay, I'm a good teacher then. Thank you. Governance accountabilities in business rescue. Business rescue. Rescue the perishing. That's what comes to mind. When I was looking at this, just rescue the perishing. Rescue the perishing. That was coming to mind. Governance and accountability. So here, we will move away from the general approaches to restructuring to regulatory, legal aspects. But from what we've explained, you should know by now, whether you're in law, there are provisions in the Act that can help you turn around. But let me just sound a word of caution that it may not necessarily end in a turnaround in all cases. You must have at the back of your mind. Nonetheless, you would even realize that even if it does not end in a turnaround in its actual sense of turnaround, it is still beneficial to you. Because when you look at the balance sheet of the company, it's a negative net worth. So if you look at your investment in the company, it's gone, it's wiped out. You don't even have money to invest, but you don't want the company to be liquidated. So now this one too, what do you want us to do for you? You know, in the banking sector, a number of banks went into receivership, right? And rightly so. Because the people, they did not have money. They cannot pay the depositors. I'll be happy. I'll be very happy that government has come to pay the money for me if I'm an owner of a bank. But some of them are, you know, if you look at the bottom line, in banks they call something capital adequacy. My Bank of Ghana bosses are here to do it, they would explain it better. It's negative. How can a bank's capital adequacy be negative? That is when we are looking at special legislation. We'll look at that. I'm not going into that though. I'm just mentioning that in passing. Negative capital adequacy. A bank must have a robust balance sheet so that when there are losses, the balance sheet can absorb those losses. But if it does not, then that bank is a dead man walking. So sometimes it's important. Now, these are the legislations. We have the SIRA. We have the Amendment Act. We have the Companies Act. And then when you go to the special legislations, we have the Banking Act, which is the Banks and Specialized Deposit Institutions Act that governs administrations and receiverships of banks in Ghana. And then the Insurance Act that governs those for insurance companies. And then of course you have the Borrowers and Lenders Act that has a bit of that in there. So what does it mean? It means that SIRA does not apply to entities that are outside of that scope. So if it's a bank, no, you don't look at SIRA. Go to the Banks and Specialized Deposit Institutions Act. If it's an insurance company, you don't look at SIRA. Go to the Insurance Act. That's what it means. If you're outside of these special people, they are so special. Yeah. Because they are public interest entities. So they must be handled as such. If you're outside of that, then you fall under the SIRA. So if I say SIRA, please know what I'm saying. Okay. The Act provides a regime for the following. I'll read. Administration of business of a company, of a distressed company, put it that way. Temporary management, so when you look at the Act in its entirety, it covers these 8 things. Okay. The purpose of my presentation today, I will focus on just a portion, because we'll not have time to go through the entire thing. Then, placing of temporary freeze on rights of creditors and other claimants. development and implementation of restructuring plan that results in a better return to creditors and shareholders. Official liquidation of a body corporate, cross-border insolvency, regulation of insolvency services. Mr. Ado mentioned that a bit. If you are not an IP and you go in practice, 2 to 5 years jail. Then netting arrangements. We're going into a bit of that. At what stage? So let me look at it this way. So when you look at the Act, it talks about administrations broadly and liquidations. Okay. When a company is distressed or insolvent, so you see the reason why I took my time to explain the insolvent. It's insolvent, that company can go into administration. So a professional can help turn it around. If the turnaround fails, what are the options? Do we get out of restructuring and hand everything over? Or do we move to the next stage, which is what? Liquidation. I'll use Mr. Ado's USC as a case study. He's not aware, but I have it there. Say. Okay. A company shall be placed in administration or restructuring if, 1, the company is unable to pay debts, current obligations as in when they fall due. Here, you are looking at liquidity. Okay. As in when the debts fall due, you are not able to pay. So you have a loan arrangement with the bank, huge loan. And the arrangement is that you pay your interest on a monthly basis. You're not to pay. So what happens? It accumulates on your balance sheet and pushes the business into further abyss, the deep side. We're saying that company can't be placed in what? Administration. Or the total assets of the company exceeds total liabilities. That's where the insolvency thing proper, comes. Or in other words, the company has a negative net worth. So when a company is insolvent, the law provides a regime that helps the company turn around in an administration scenario. Administration just means that you're bringing somebody else in with the requisite technical expertise to manage the affairs of the company. At this point, the company is not dying. The company is on the way to dying. But we want the person to come and salvage or save the company from going down further. So these are the situations or the circumstances under which a company can be placed in administration. Look at the first part. You may have a positive balance sheet. Your assets may be more than your liabilities, but still have liquidity problems. You may not be able to pay your liabilities when they fall due. Under what circumstance would that happen? You don't have liquid assets. You have a lot of fixed assets. The assets don't even make sense. Other assets, huge, sitting there, staring at your face. When we go inside, what is there? When the auditors come, they will impair it. So they say it's not recoverable. All kinds of things in there. So you see, your assets are huge compared to liabilities, but you're still struggling. You can't pay because you don't pay is not money you used to pay. Yeah. So you must have money in your bank account or in an instrument that you can convert into ready amount of cash in a short while, 3 months. Government securities. If I invest in T-bills, I can decide tomorrow, Charlie, give me my money. Because there's an obligation I have to pay. If you go and invest in government bonds, now you must look for a buyer. Secondary market. And now to our second market with some way, because everybody is being cautious. Or you have some asset, it's a serious problem. Suspense account. Thieves, when they steal, that's where they put. When they steal in the company, you put it in suspense. You look for the other leg, you will not find. Suspense account is an asset. How is an asset? So, You can have a balance sheet that looks good, total assets, more than, but Charlie, when you go inside, not trouble. So when an administrator is appointed, he must investigate. So as part of the investigation, he may find some of these things. And when he finds, he must report. Amen? So the administrator is appointed to oversee the administration process. And there's a whole legal regime around that whole thing. So here we are going to law, so I must be careful with my words, because when I say something that is not in accordance with the lawyers worry me. Okay, please, is this slide okay? I have my act here, so just in case.
Jonas Aye again from JSA Consulting. The last one, company has a negative net worth. Probably a little bit of explanation for all of us.
The negative net worth is just negative equity.
Yeah, okay. What I'm saying is has traded over the time at the losses that has eroded its capital. So I just wanted to explain that a little. And
please,
is this shall or may? A company may be placed in administration or shall, because we have.
Let me read it. So you see the lawyers, I told you.
Especially in the case of the first situation, you can have total assets exceeding total liabilities, but you may be able to turn around.
Okay. So the actual wording is shall. Thank you very much. You are very observant. It's shall. Okay. Shall and may, they are not the same. Yeah. It shall. Okay. Shall be placed in administration. Okay. Thank you very much for that contest. Okay. Who can appoint an administrator? Who can appoint an administrator? 4 categories. Either the company, the liquidator, in a private liquidation case. So that one takes us back into the Companies Act. Private liquidation is not in the Insolvency Act, because this one is insolvency. So in a private liquidation situation, the directors decide to just wind up because maybe they are tired or they want to check out of the market. So it's not because of an issue of insolvency. It's not as if they cannot pay their liabilities, they can pay. They're just not interested in this, our country. They want to leave. Or they've disinvested. You cannot just carry your bag and leave like that. It doesn't happen that way. You must make sure you wind down the affairs of the company in a logical, structured manner. And there are provisions in the Companies Act for that. So the directors have to file a declaration of solvency to confirm that their company is solvent. They can pay their liabilities when they fall due. They can pay all their liabilities. And then they will appoint a private liquidator who now takes over the affairs of the company and runs the company to a logical conclusion. I'm borrowing my boss's words. So, but the private liquidator may come to a determination later on when they probably put a publication in the newspaper calling for those who are owed by the company to file their claims. Then you realize that, now the thing will be like that. More people are owed, but they have not disclosed. Especially if you validate those claims and confirm those claims to be true claims that are obligations of the company to pay. So when you adjust the balance sheet, it throws the company into insolvency. In that case, you can no more sit inside you can no more sit in the Companies Act. You must catapult yourself into what? Yes. Because now the company is insolvent. So to wind a company that is insolvent, you must what? The act that is applicable is SIRA. So that is the instance. Then the creditor or receiver appointed by the creditor. Then the court. You realize that a number of these things before, you cannot just, for instance, you cannot, as a creditor, just go and call Prosper that you had appointed as receiver. No. you must still go to court. Yes, you must file an application in court. The court must determine whether a receiver can be appointed over the company. You see. So back to company. Who are the representatives of the company? The directors, right? So if they come to a determination that the company is insolvent, they can pass a resolution to place the company in administration. When the administrator is appointed, the law says the administrator is the restructuring officer of the company, unless the creditors in a watershed meeting decide to change. So the administrator is automatically the restructuring officer, the one that is responsible for performing the restructuring, developing the restructuring agreement, restructuring plan, all that. Automatic. But the creditors can say, oh, I don't like you. So when they make a determination, then the law says that then a different restructuring officer will be appointed. But mostly, it's the same man. That will be the restructuring officer. When a company is already in liquidation, you cannot place that company back in. You cannot go and bury somebody or be burying somebody and bring the person back. No. Liquidation is always the last resort. That is why before you take the step to liquidate, you must have considered all the possible things. Have you done everything possible to turn around? Charlie, if they know the pap, do you understand that term? Don't pretend you don't speak pidgin. Then you must wind down. You must wind down. Okay. Now let me focus a bit on the court. It is the court may appoint on application of, you see, on application. So you must go to court on application of a creditor, liquidator, or registrar, or where the court is satisfied that the company is or may become insolvent. Survival of the company and assets are reasonably capable of being achieved by administration. It will be more advantageous to realize the assets than to place the companies in immediate winding up. Or it's more expeditious to settle liabilities owed to the company. If all these are there, it's all, yeah? You have to be careful. So all. Then the company can go into administration. So the court has a mandate to determine. You bring an application to court, you go and you have to go and defend why the company has to go into administration. So as a creditor, you can go that route. And we are exploring those options even in the receiverships that we are currently undertaking. Companies that owe some of the banks heavy, they don't want to pay. But they're all over the place. Conducting media interviews, riding in Rolls Royce, buying things for their wives. You'll be there, you see some publication. This company is doing some massive investment, but they owe. You say, nah, these people, they are taking me for a ride. You can actually bring an application to court to place that company in administration if those characteristics are there. These things, they are all here, so you can find time and read them. If you have any question, please ask. If there's anything that doesn't sit, Felix, please. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Julius. I just want to stress that the law makes it easier to place a company in administration by asking for a simple resolution, okay, ordinary resolution, as the lawyers term it. Okay. In other words, the directors can agree. They don't need a special resolution, which will be 75% plus. Directors with over 50% shareholding representing 50% or so, can just vote, have ordinary resolution to have the company placed in resolution in administration. And the essence of that is when a company is hurting, is distressed, you want to expedite the processes for it to be turned around quickly. So you don't want to have very tedious, long drawn out discussions and board meetings and AGMs and all to achieve that. But for a company to go into liquidation, you need a special resolution, right? And that requires a higher threshold. Okay. So this is all to facilitate early entry into the administration mode so that the company can be rescued in time, because time is money, as you all know. Thank you, Julius.
Thank you, sir. Effects of the appointment of an administrator. When a company is placed in administration, it doesn't mean the directors have to be sacked. And I'll explain to you why that's important. When it comes to signing of a very important agreement, the directors are very key. Thank you very much. However, they'll be there, but it's like that they are not there. Their powers suspended. Think about being powerful yesterday and the following day not being powerful, but they are still be there. It's not very nice, but powers will now be assumed by the administrator. He assumes the powers of the directors. He now runs the show, he calls the shots. And it's a similar thing when it comes to administrations, official administrations under the Bankers Act. Once an administrator is appointed, the powers of the directors, in fact, that one says director shareholders suspended. The official administrator now assumes those powers, to manage the affairs. You need power to manage. You cannot manage without power. That's why the law is couched that way. The directors may act, but they can only act with the prior written consent or approval of the administrator. They cannot just get up and do anything. Those powers is gone. Before you can act, the administrator must give you power to act. Or in the case where that act is explicitly stated in the law. For instance, the law says the directors, once the restructuring agreement is agreed, must sign the agreement. You must sign it. So in the law, it is express. You must sign the agreement. In fact, they must pass a resolution stating that the company has given them the authorization to sign, and then they must sign. What is the effect on employees? Employees are a very important aspect of a business operations, right? In fact, there is always a saying that your people are your most important assets. The fact that the company is administrated doesn't mean that they should just clear off. No. You must do things in a logical fashion. If the administrator conducts an assessment and comes to the determination that, we have too many people, it's not efficient, let's let some of them go. Those must be done in a very humane and legal manner. You cannot just sack them. There are laws that regulate that. You must engage, you may have unions, you must engage them, you must come to an agreement on severance and all that. Okay. And the law says, listen, if you have to terminate, you must terminate within 21 days of the appointment of the administrator. So for instance, if you come to a determination that you don't need 100 people out of 200, you must work like... Can you imagine having a company with staff of 4,700? It's a lot. You can also ask for extension, right, from the court though, but it's not easy. So you find instances where you may be saddled with all kinds of other contracts after the expiration of that period, because you've probably not had the time to dive deep, to dive deep into the issues. You see, and I'm thinking the law, makes it that way because, when the company is transitioning, new man has come. The staff, they're also human beings. They need to be very clear on what is happening. Am I going to stay or am I going to leave? Any salary that will accrue, when you are doing all this, any salary that will accrue to the staff, you must pay. you must pay. The law says, and this provision of the law is similar to a provision in the Banks and Specialized Deposit Taking Staff Act. Okay, I'll get there. Let me not mention that at this point. Okay, so I was talking about extension. Then the third effect is on the property of the company. And this is the sweet part. This is the reprieve part. This is the burden lifting part of it. So all those creditors that are watching the assets of the company with eagle's eye, because the company owes them, the law says that all those things have to what? Be set aside. For now. If you have a case, you have to go to court. So for instance, a secure creditor that for instance, after even the restructuring agreement is signed, that disagrees with the terms of the restructuring agreement can go to court to say, I want to realize my security. The court will make some determinations to come to that conclusion. The court will say, if letting that secure creditor go through the process will be it uses a certain term, prejudicial, something like that. Or if it is disadvantageous to the creditor, then the court may determine that the creditor should realize the asset. But not without recourse, the administrator will also have part of that whole process. Okay. What of banks? So it says transaction of dealing in the property of a company in administration is void except dealing by administrator, of course. It's only as administrator can deal in the assets. With written consent of the administrator, so the administrator can ask somebody to deal in the asset, written consent, or by court order. You will see that in the law plenty. Court. If you have any issues, go to court. I want to mention this one. I've highlighted it because let me read it out. There are exceptions. It says that payment made by a bank in good faith. The lawyers will help us with what it means when it says good faith. And in the ordinary course of the bank's business, that one I understand. Ordinary course means that in the ordinary operations of the bank, day-to-day affairs of the bank. Out of the accounts of the company on or before the day on which the bank was notified in writing about the administration, or before the bank had reasons to believe the company was in administration, whichever is earlier. So what does it mean? So, of course, the company will have an account with banks, right? You may debit the account with charges. There could be a check that was written that has to be paid, right? Okay. It's saying that if you, and of course, there are administrative aspects of managing a company and administration that may not necessarily be indicated here in the law. So for instance, when a company is in administration, you must notify GRA and for them to come and do a tax audit. That one there is standard. You must write to the banks that there's an administrator. You must change signatories, or all those things, they are standard. So he's saying that if you got information as a bank, you got information about the administration of the company, then, and that is earlier than the administrator notified you, then what does it mean? It means that you cannot deal in the account, if assets, it could be anything, maybe money in the account of that company without recourse to the administrator. So whichever one comes earlier. So the administrator writes to you, let's say, today is 8th of November. But I don't know how the courts will determine, but the evidence will have to be adduced, isn't it? But you got notified, or you knew that the company was in administration 2 days ago. Your number of days starts counting from that day. So from that day, between that day and now, you cannot deal in the assets of the company. If you got wind later on, then the earlier is the date of the administrator's letter.
Thanks, Julius. Now, Julius mentioned that the powers of the directors are suspended. So they will be in a holding pattern and they won't have the authority they used to have before the appointment of the administrator. The reason being that in a successful administration, once you finish your work, the powers of the company goes back to the directors. So the directors will be hanging while you turn the company around, and then when it's over, they get back their powers and continue to run their company. And that's why they are not let go. Okay. Contrast that with a liquidation, where instantly they are terminated. Their powers are terminated permanently. Okay. In this case, it's supposed to be just a rescue operation. When it's over, they get their powers back to continue with their operations. Same way with the employees. The administrator, the assumption is that they are on board to continue with whatever role they were playing before the administration kicked in. But you, the administrator, have 21 days to decide which of the staff you want to work with to do your restructuring. Now, obviously, or in many instances when companies are distressed, the salary, the wages bill is one of the key significant elements which you need to trim. Because most of those bills are, by definition, unbearable to the company. Let me put it mildly. Okay. So the administrator have to quickly, from day of appointment to the 21st day, review the program. That's the model, how he's going to cut back staff, how he's going to restructure the business to be able to turn it around. And then those, quote unquote, access to the needs of the new company, you have to let them go. Okay. Third point I want to make is that for secure creditors, once the administration kicks in, you have 2 weeks to file your application that you want to realize your security. Okay. If you miss that 2-week gap, that opportunity is gone. Okay. You have to do that, and for those of you banks and the like, remember that. The law still provides you a 2-week period. But of course, the administrator will have to contest that application to see how that particular security you want to realize impacts the operations of his restructuring, the new business model. Okay? And then the judge makes the decision whether to grant the application or include it in the restructured model. And then when you finish with your rescue, you give the secured creditor his due. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So, Mr. Ado has helped me. He's done all my subsequent slides. So I'll share the slides. So please, you spend a little bit of time to go through it. I have just about 25 minutes. About just 20 minutes to wrap up. So let me just go straight into the success stories, because there are some good learnings that we can glean out of that. So I'm going to look at, I don't think with time I'll be able to look at all of them, but my plan was to look at 3 companies, 1 in Ghana and 2 in South Africa. The first company is United Steel, and the administrator is yours truly, Mr. Felix Ado. And then South African Airways. And the last one is a company in South Africa also called Basil Reed. Basil Reed. These 2 companies were actually case studies in our London conference, right? Insol conference. So there were some discussions around that. So I'd like to share some of the views with you. So, Felix, if at any point you want to add something to the United Steel part of it, please feel free to. Okay. United Steel is a company that deals in manufacturing of steel rods, right? Rods and stuff for building. Okay. It's been established a while back. But they have some challenges, and those challenges, date back to a few years back. I will show you some numbers, and then you can make a determination whether or not this company is distressed, and therefore should have been in administration. Some of the challenges that they had was lack of working capital, money for day-to-day running of the company. I think I've mentioned that earlier in my submission. If you don't have money to run the day-to-day affairs of a company, it's a recipe for disaster. You can pay salaries, you can pay suppliers when they tell you your credit period is 30 days. You can't pay interest when your interest payments are monthly. It's chaos. They didn't have working capital. And you see what we mean by they don't have working capital. It is brutal. Failure of lenders to evaluate situation and release working capital on time. And sometimes the banks they have their own internal processes to follow. They cannot just be dishing out money to you so you don't pay later on. They have things to do. So those things may affect the timeliness of the release of cash. So you may have a nice loan contract with the bank, but they are not done with their due diligence. They are not going to give you the money. They must finish. Security must be perfected, even though sometimes they give the money before security perfection. You see. So when it's working capital matter, and the working capital and the funding is not coming, it's very distressful because you cannot operate. In fact, your operations can even grind to a halt. Quality and availability of scraps. They are raw material of scraps. I'm sure you've seen the boys. They go around in keke. If you dare put your knife something down, you are not there. Let me tell you a funny story. So water, the water meter. Water meter. You have water meters in your houses, right? Okay. These days, the waterworks people, they say they want to put it outside so that if you are not in the house, you can come and read the meter. I don't understand them. And the water meter, there is this iron aspect of the thing, the connection. These crab boys. 2 occasions. In the night, by the time I woke up in the morning, Saturday morning, water was gushing out like this, like a fountain. And it's just that metal, all because of United Steel. Just that metal that they were interested in. That thing doesn't cost 50 Ghana. In fact, I'm sure the water has been pumping out since 12 midnight. We fixed it. 2 weeks down the line, they did it again. Because of scrap. United Steel. They need the scrap as raw material for melting and for their rods. So you know what we did? Next time, we put plastic there. That thing, there's a plastic version. Put the plastic there. 6 months, it's still there. If you want the plastic, remove it there. So they use scraps as their raw material, but it's very, very difficult to get. Can you imagine small people going around picking, stealing people's things, small, before they now go and put in the depot? They are bigger suppliers. They send the boys to win. They tell them, steal. When you see, take. If you see, they take. And they will now go and give it to them before they now supply. If you are finding difficulty in sourcing raw materials, you will suffer as a business. They had those issues. And then the quality of the raw materials was also bad. They will bring you all kinds of things. You must find time to sort. You must have the right equipment to separate. So the cost of processing was also high. They had 2 major industrial fires. One company, many issues. And then poor management decisions, corporate governance issues. Let's see what Felix, let's look at their income statement. See, 2018, 131 million Ghana cedi loss. 2019, 44 million cedi loss. 2020, 40 million loss. This one, now good company. That one, your guess is as good as mine. Balance sheet. Debt, 1.8 billion. That's a lot of money. 1.8 billion. Look at the assets. 296 million. Equal to insolvent. They had 50 creditors. DRA alone is owed 649 million. They were not paying their taxes. Tax evasion. The directors were even arrested at the point. Banks. 773 million. Amano's bank is also part. Amano is at the back. His bank is also part. It's not his bank, like he's the receiver of the bank. That's what I mean. Suppliers, 467 million. Huge. All these people, these are the creditors that they had. They defaulted on their debts. They will go and restructure. They will default, restructure, default. They will sin. They will forgive them. They will sin. They will forgive them. They will sin. Court cases, there were judgments obtained in some. The assets were attached. It was a company in the total disarray. Then the director said, I'm sure they would have consulted Felix that Charlie come, we'll be having problems. What do you think? Then Felix will say, there's something in Sarah. Okay, you will show them the way. So they decided to place the company in administration on 19th of what? October 2020. This is what Felix's focus was on in terms of the restructuring. Look at what he did. I've told you the story. Bad. He says, let's increase the capacity utilization by from 28% to 76%. So they had huge plant, but capacity in terms of utilization was low. Raw materials were not coming. And I'm sure there were some other issues as well. Because if you have huge plant, the plant is taking space, generating cost, but you're not turning it around. That's excess capacity, it is cost. He said, Felix said he was going to achieve that by 2025. Then the scrap supply, we need to solve the scrap supply issues. That is our main raw material. Let's solve it. Let's get some holding depots in the northern part of the country, in the southern part of the country. Let's find a way to make sure that we have constant supply of raw materials. I don't think Felix will tell the boys to go in. Then debt and balance sheet restructuring. That was key. Balance sheet bad. Felix, 90% haircut. That one your head self will not be there. Can you imagine being owed by a company and they say 90%? It means that they will pay you 10%. If the company owes you 10 million, they will pay you how much? That's a massive haircut. Maybe government should have proposed 90% haircut, like we'll be in trouble. You see, and then 12-month moratorium, reprieve. It gives the company some time to breathe. You get it? So you can, push cash in other areas instead of going to pay debt. How can you believe you're just paying debt? No. 4 years payment period. You see, those that were maturing, I will pay you 4 years. Debt reprieve. And also, to get some capital, about $5 million to pump into the business. These are all restructuring strategies. Then, of course, when it comes to transparency and regulatory compliance, they were not complying with tax laws, all those kinds of things. You have to resolve. You have to go and engage the GRA. So he said he was going to do all those things, and I'm sure he did. Then promote good corporate governance, new organogram, reduce expatriates. They were just there chopping money in dollars. The company is making losses. Do we need them? No. Expatriates are paid in dollars. Yeah. So as the exchange rate is dancing, they are just saying hallelujah. Functional board. There must be a proper board. Corporate governance issues in this country is. I'm very happy that the Bank of Ghana has put in some measures for the banks. You cannot mess around. But individual, business owners must also take that into consideration. Must be a proper board of directors, chairman, non-executive directors, all those things properly done. Then the policies of the company has to be documented. Okay, let me add a bit to it. With all those nice plans that Felix had, it didn't work because the company was beyond salvation. So the company had to be placed in liquidation. The directors disagreed. I was reading their application, the thing they took to court. They made all kinds of allegations against Felix. Felix came to tell them that the company could be turned around, and that if the company is placed in administration, there will be national security. Which national security problem? If you have blown cash, taking money from the company, you've run the company down, and your net worth is negative 1 point something billion, and someone has come to help you, take this burden off your head. Are you not supposed to just salute, shake, and move? Because you can't, turn around the company. It's too much. They should have done this administration thing long time. This law probably should have come long time. You see, when you start feeling distress, even a human being, when you're stressed out, you don't have to wait to fall sick before you go to the hospital. You must take measures early on. Let's look at South African Airways. It's an airline, right? It's a national flag carrier of South Africa. They are proud of it. If you are traveling to South Africa, you have to be on that airline. Beautiful airline. It's owned by the government 100%. It's been established since 1994. They had 49 planes, 49. Look at the statistics. 9 were owned, 40 are leased. Lease means what? They rented them, right? Obligation. You'll be paying rentals. It's a lot. 49 leased. Subsidiaries: Mango, Airchef, South African Airways Technica, South African Airways Cargo. Mango is also an airline in South Africa. It's a low-cost airline. Travel from one place in South Africa to the other. It's a subsidiary of South African Airways. Airchefs, they're into the business of cooking, catering for airlines. They cook. You know, sometimes when you're on a plane, they bring you food. They do those things. Then, South African Airways also owned one of the biggest company that provided maintenance services to airplanes. It's called South African Airways Technica. Then South African Airways Cargo Services. All these companies were there. They had 4,008 employees. The statistics are all there. Now in December 2019, so the company went into distress. And the company has been making losses for years. But you know, a national carrier cannot be handled in the same way as if it was a private. So they'll try and manage, government will be pumping money in there to manage the working capital requirements and all that. But I got to a point, said actually this thing, and this one is not CRO, it's South African Companies Act. So the restructuring was done under that act. They realized that the airline was suffering, and what triggered it was sometime in 2019, in November, there were massive industrial action by the staff, like 8 days. And then in fact, some of the unions had requested for the company to be placed in business rescue. That went into the public domain. Once that went into the public domain, confidence in the airline started dropping. As for airline there, when your confidence they drop, people will start cancelling their tickets. Hey? South Africa Airways, Tobulu, cancel. Emirates, cancel. Qatar Airways, cancel. So your pipeline, gone. So they wanted to make this a bit sustainable. I'll show you the balance sheet and you see what I mean. So look at the issues that they had. Significant yearly losses since 2012. FS losses, interest costs, lack of adequate recapitalization resulting in severe liquidity challenges. Working capital, governance issues resulting in high turnover of executive. In 10 years, they had 8 CEOs, 4 CFOs, 5 board chairs, at least 50 executive committee members. Why? If people are leaving your company, quick, it means there's something. You will not attract the right talent. So all the people you'll be attracting will be bad, so they will keep going and coming. But if there's stability, there'll be confidence in that company. Inadequate capitalization of subsidiaries. So Mango, they don't have capital, so because this one, the parents, he has to be giving money from the money that they're supposed to be using to run their operations. So causing what? Liquidity challenges for the company. Increased competition with significant pressure on pricing of tickets. When you are traveling, you go online. You type Accra, landing Accra. They will bring you plenty. Some of them can get 2,000 Ghana, but where to take you to pass? You'll be sorry. If you go for that airline, you'll be in trouble. So just pay a little premium and do direct flights. Don't go and be in the air for 30 hours. That's not good. Then let's talk about the strikes. Look at their balance sheet. No income statement. 2016, 1.4 billion rand loss. 6.3 billion rand loss in 2017. 5 billion rand loss. Are we going or are we coming? This one is here. this thing. You are just saving name. So look at the operating costs, you see. So even at that level, there's loss. Before you now start talking about finance costs. Finance costs, that is a significant part of the company's cost. Massive. Okay? Balance sheet. Look at total assets. 2018, 16.7 billion, right? Look at total liabilities, 29. 2017, 14 billion, 33. 2018, 12 billion, liabilities 25. It's huge. And look at where the red things are. See where they are? Accumulated losses. So they've been making their retained earnings is a retained loss for years. Look at where they have long-term loans. They have trade payables. Look at it. Trade payables and long-term debt alone. Close to, it's even more than the assets across the years. This is a company in distress. So what did they do? The government decided to provide funding, all right? Government is shareholder, so you must lead by example, all right? And they also wanted to save the airline. They don't want disgrace. So they provided funding of 10.5 billion. That's not bad. And this is how they were supposed to. And then they said, the argument was that if the company is not placed in business rescue but is liquidated, the cost of liquidation will be 18.5 billion. So sometimes when you liquidate, it may be more costly than getting someone in to turn the business around. Because when you get someone in to turn the business around, at least you can get some haircuts. I feel it's 90%. So it means that when you did the adjustment on the balance sheet, liabilities go down by 90%. That would be something else. Then, so concurrent creditors, we're going to get haircuts of 25%, right? And then we payable within 3 years. Extension of period of repayment. Cash flow reprieve. And so on and so forth. Then, okay, so all these numbers are here. So they were going to retain only 1,000 employees out of the 4,000. What does it mean? It means that, so the 3,000, what were they doing? They were just cost. So what it means that they could have still operated with 1,000 employees. Hey, I'm sure the politicians were just putting their people there. Joy for the boys, go. You know? But of course, when you are retrenching, it's not cheap. But it's a one-off payment. Right? You pay one off and then you move on. And of course, they wanted a strategic equity partner. You saw the strategic alliance I spoke about earlier. Yes. Someone that can provide some financing and that can also provide technical expertise for the running of the airline. My time is up. But so read. Okay, so the story about South African Airways. Now, so they went off for some time, right? Remember? They went off for like almost 2 years. They were not flying. So if you have to go to South Africa, I think you have to go to Kenya or something. Or do some. It was bad. But now they are back. They are back. Why? Because balance sheet is briefing. Liabilities have been reduced significantly. All because of the business turnaround, right? And those were, it was legal. It was legal. It was a legal business turnaround. Not the one that the directors decided to. No. They did under the law. So there are things that there are provisions that could help them. But so read, look at them. 1960. It's a construction company in South Africa. It's a huge construction company. They had 5 operational segments: roads, construction, mining, development. And then they also had a segment in St. Helena. It's an island. As at the time the company was placed in administration, they had 43 sites, active sites. It means uncompleted projects. 43 across South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, and Lesotho. You see the thing that is happening in India, in China. Have you heard of the China property market issues? Or you've not heard? When we are suffering here looking for houses to sleep in, they have all kinds of sky-rise buildings there. No one is interested, some of them uncompleted, because the property market has crashed. So 43 sites, no money to complete the projects. See the employees. You remember when Phyllis said that employees are a key aspect of this whole thing. 7,230 employees. Permanent and contract combined. What were the issues? When government is suffering, you fill in your pocket in two ways. Inflation will be biting you hard. You may also not get government contracts because government will direct spending somewhere else, maybe into social issues. During COVID, were you seeing people constructing roads and things? No. People are hungry as roads. So they'll transfer the money into what? Social interventions. Food for the kayaks on the road, this for that, and stuff like that. When it happens, you will feel the pinch as a contractor. So those were the issues, some of the issues then. Then they were making very low margins on their projects. You spend your margin is like profit, for lack of better, profit, small. Because you know the contractors, you know what they do, is their margins that they turn around to start a new one in anticipation of repayment. So if government is not repaying, they had the same issues. Government was not repaying, like in Ghana, contractors, government is not paying them because government doesn't have money. Which one they will use to turn around? Guarantee is not being extended. Performance guarantee, before you construct, they will tell you go and make performance guarantee. So if you don't do the work, they will call it a guarantee. The bankers know this. If the bankers are not interested in giving you a performance guarantee, how would you get a contract? Creditors tighten payment terms. I don't know whether they bought the creditors or they are not having a relation with them. Tighten. So if it is 30 days, now 15 days, where would they get the money from? Delay resolution of contract claims. Like in the case of Ghana, I'm talking about IPCs, like in Ghana, interim payment certificates. Government was not paying. All these things will give them problems as a construction company. So you know what the management did outside of the law themselves? They said, oh, you know what? This, if we don't take action, we'll be in trouble. So let's develop a restructuring plan ourselves. Not under the law. Let's look at what is happening. Let's see what we can do. So they came up with a plan. Conclude debt standstill agreement with lenders. Debt standstill, it means that you are not moving anywhere. We there here, no. Wait, let's move forward small before you come. Debt standstill. So it includes 18 months moratorium on the repayment of loans, totally about 390 million from 1st December. Raised 300 million through rights issue. That one they were successful. Sell non-core assets. There were some assets that were just sitting there, not being used. Sell them off. Why do you want to keep them? Resolve long outstanding claims. Get a consultant. Let them go and see the government people. They should talk for you. It happens. Conclude onerous legacy construction contracts. Onerous. Onerous contracts. The contracts are just giving you cost. Hey, those contracts. But you see, something happened. Notwithstanding the progress made on the above, I've told you they were successful on the rights issue. Management advised that the company did not have sufficient funding to meet financial obligations in the short term. So what did they do? They said that they went to their lenders. Can you give us money? They said no. Enough is enough. Let's move away from this or informal thing you are doing. Let's bring someone who is an expert to come and do it. So from the informal process into the formal, into the law. So they now, so is it outside business rescue? So on 14th June, they placed the company under business rescue. So enough of the thing you are doing, it's not working. Bring somebody else to do it. Look at their income statement. 2015, it was not bad. 2016, 19 billion. No, it's billion. Forgive me. It's 19 billion. Then 2017 was so 19 million. The thing that always supposed to be no, it's 19 million. This is supposed to be 1 billion. Yeah, it's 1 billion. So 1 billion, 19 million, and 192 million. Okay, so you see that profit reduced and it became worse the following year. Balance sheet, look at it. In their case, you see that the balance sheet was not that bad, yeah? Total liabilities in 2017 was like 2644. Total assets was about 2749, but it was still bad because of the issues that they had. Okay? So this is how they went about the business rescue. Cost reduction initiatives, cash management, engaging shareholders and finance parties, and then also engaging the government on delayed contracts. You can read this by yourself. Yes. Okay, my time is up. This is what I want you to remember. Don't forget all the things I said. Don't forget this one. Restructuring would depend on the unique circumstances of a company, its legal and financial structure, and the severity of its financial problems. You cannot have a one-size-fits-all for everybody. That's why you need a professional to help you, to do the assessment for you. Take the right steps early and at the right time. Consult. So tell your clients that. And then lastly, CIRA provides a framework within which companies in Ghana can be saved. Let's use it. Thank you.
I think Julius has done a marvelous job. Yeah, those two business rescues were very big. They were very big in South Africa. And there was a lot of political undertones relating to those two companies. I think what is important when you're doing business rescues is to not just understand the economics of the company, but you need to understand the political economy, the context within which, first of all, you're going to do this business rescue, and indeed why the company is where it is. So that is qualitative stuff, which and you won't pick it up in the numbers, and you can do and present an economically viable restructuring plan, but the political economy will frustrate it. Prosper is going to talk about the business life cycle and debt implications. Prosper has a knack of presenting difficult and complex concepts simply, so that we are able to understand these concepts in our own context. Prosper is the senior partner at Bridgewater, the investment banking outfit. So, Prosper, give him a hand. I know we've just had lunch. Give him a hand. Yeah.
Thanks, George. George has made things very interesting for me. In terms of making complex things simple. I hope I'm able to do so. And I was looking forward to seeing Julius. Julius. So Julius is like, it's like that friend who you go and you go and buy food, and then you say I'm going to use the washroom, and you come back, he's eating all. So Julius has done the job. So my bit is very light. It's going to be short because I'm sharing this session with Dr. Asamoah, correct? And he's going to do a more dense part of this presentation. I would say, if we can give it up for Julius again, his session was great. It was a good one. I am not as charismatic as him. As he was moving to and fro, I was just admiring him, So my session is basically going to touch on business life cycle and debt implications. As Julius mentioned in his session, there are a number of senior professionals here. I'm assuming we are a little bit familiar with the concept of business life cycle. But I don't know, are you guys familiar? Do you know what a business life cycle is? If anybody opts to help, just like Julius, I'm open, you can come in at any time. So my session is basically going to take us through the business life cycle, the business risk curve, We'll look at the capital implications in that, and then we look at the corporate demise curve, and then debt considerations for debt management. So when it comes to the concept of business life cycle, I like to look at it like what we see. So typically, every business goes through a cycle. If you look at an economy, at any given point in time, you would find businesses at various stages. So this is a plant, right from the early stage. The middle point is where you see it, flower looking so good, but then there's a possibility of it dying. Now the question is, what influences death, right? And whether or not there's a concept such as natural death. Is there any concept such as natural death? Should we think every company that exists will die one day? Is it a fair assumption? That's a hard one to think about. So, or is death imposed? Does it come from somewhere? So these are the kind of things we have to think about. Now this is a plant, but in the context of a business, businesses typically tend to have 4 to 5 stages in their life cycle. So the first phase is called the early phase, which is where you would have, we say concept development, ideas that are seed. They are just businesses that are as ideas in people's minds. And then they develop the concept. From there, they try to put the concept into motion by starting up. We have several stories of businesses that go from concept to start. I think one of the most famous in our generation is Facebook and what it's been able to do. I think we've seen the likes of Uber and many more. But moving from a stage to another is not guaranteed. There are several factors that would influence how a business makes progress. So, from the startup phase, the next is the growth phase. When the business is introduced to the market, it begins to tweak its business model to meet the needs of the market and begins to see changes in some key variables which I'll address. So we call such businesses growing businesses. Now, for a country like Ghana, where we have about 90% of our economy being SME driven, the interesting bit is most businesses are between early phase and expansion. That is the reality we face in Ghana. And from expansion, we go into, or within the expansion phase, there's what we call shakeout. Really, every business, starts as a concept, you try it out. Then you begin to experience the market and you begin to define where your focus area should be. So, maybe you thought about selling 6 products. You realize that perhaps, let's focus on 2. Or let me say for professionals, you thought about having a full practice and then you change your mind, let's have a boutique. So there's that shakeout. And what shakeout does is it gives you focus and then begins to drive your business model because you understand your market better. And that moves you to the maturity stage where a business is comfortable in the marketplace, where a business is making all it can in terms of revenue, building up cash. There are few examples we can look at, but I wouldn't go in there yet because I think it can be quite controversial. Right? Now, the last phase of a business is decline. This, I personally don't find it very comfortable addressing this line this way, because this line assumes that every business will eventually die one day. But really, like I said from the beginning, it's something that we have to look at and see whether or not it's something that we should hold constant or otherwise. But the key question here is, how do we define the level of a business? And for all of us here, for the interest of restructuring, insolvency, the key point here is businesses can be distressed at any level. It's not as though a business goes all the way to maturity and then dies. You can have businesses that get into distress right from the beginning. We have businesses at the growth stage getting into distress. But the key thing here, if you're a professional and you were to be engaged on a distress scenario, I think one of the key things you have to define is where to place the business in the life cycle. Because the parameters around how businesses function in the life cycle varies. The environment within a growing business is completely different from a matured business. Right? If you take a growing business, a lot of things associated with systems, policies are not as defined. Very few bureaucracies, heavily built around founders. So is it fair to say, if you take over a business as an administrator, is it fair to say in your review, pre-appointment analysis, is it fair to say a business has weak corporate governance if it is a business at the startup phase, for example, where the business is heavily driven by the founders? So I think these are some of the things we need to understand with that clarity that, businesses go from stage to stage, and at any stage they can be distressed. So there are a few variables that can be observed. These are just examples in determining where a business is placed in the life cycle. So variables such as growth in sales, profits, assets, and these things are all industry dependent and must be placed within an economic context, the macro environment. So we are going to have a little discussion. I'm going to engage everyone here on, we know a lot of businesses in the market. Without prejudice any business, we will try and place businesses merely by observation within the life cycle. Perhaps you could share your thoughts on what you think. So if I go back to the life cycle with our observation in terms of businesses that we have around us, for me, I'll start by saying, if you look at a business like MTN, one would say it's matured, but why? Right? I would say MTN is matured because it's had a certain level of consistency in performance when it comes to growth over a sustained period of time. And when we look at the kind of volumes that MTN is doing in the context of the industry and over the period of time it's existed, I would say MTN is a matured business. So I would say that business variables must be observed over a period of time. So in terms of determining whether a business is early stage growth or matured, it's not just an observation as of today. You can't look at a business today and say it's a matured business. You can't look at a business today and say it's declining. You have to observe it over a period of time. You have to do some trend analysis. Then someone will ask, so what about if the business doesn't have any history? Well, then it's a startup, which is quite clear. So mere time does not determine the stage of a business in the life cycle. So the fact that we've seen businesses in my kind of work, I've seen businesses when you're raising capital for companies, a lot of financial institutions who would want businesses that have a certain level of performance that have existed for a certain period of time. Banks typically will say 3 to 5 years and all. And you hear some companies say, well, we've been in operation since 1960. But there's nothing to show. So really, such a business, if it's a measure of time, that doesn't guarantee where a business lies within the life cycle. Is there anyone here who can suggest positioning any business that we know? Julius, I'm expecting one from you, by the way. So if you can suggest, based on what I've just said, or if you have a view on what I've just shared, you can feel free and come in. But if you have an entity in mind you think you can place somewhere within the life cycle and share your thoughts on it, That would be great. Is the lunch working? Lunch. Julius, the anointing us. So, any ideas in Ghana, around us? Wow. I think it's a question for all. Mechanical Lloyd. You know, we haven't looked at the numbers, but just by external observation, where can we place Mechanical Lloyd?
I think Mechanical Lloyd is currently out of business because is it the franchise or whatever? I don't know. It's a licensing agreement that gives them is it BMW? That thing is gone. Is it BMW? Yeah. Yeah. So they are out of. So I'll put them in. Can you please go back to your. So I'll say decline. Decline. Possibly extinct. Extinct. Yeah. Extinct.
Okay. So that's any other
On the Mechanical Lloyd again. I wanted to.
Okay, please go on if you want.
I think when maybe I'll put Coca-Cola at the matured stage. I mean, Coca-Cola has been in existence for who knows how long.
Yeah.
I mean, so many years, and it's still one of the top beverages operating. I mean, worldwide, you can go to every nook and crook and you see Coca-Cola there, and they are still doing well. So I think they've matured. I mean,
Right.
they've gone past the startup growth, and they've
They are
leveled
up there.
Yeah.
So should we expect, if we are to go by the assumption of natural death, will it die one day, perhaps?
I think the death can be prolonged. I mean, their lifestyle, their existence can be prolonged.
All right.
Yeah, unless maybe they decide that we are tired.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, but it can be prolonged.
Okay. I think that's one.
Okay. I think if we go back to, back in history, where we look at the fact that the joint stock company was created to basically divorce management from shareholders and therefore to give the business perpetual continuity. It is, I think, the concept that every business must die does not sit well with me. I think it depends on how we define business, the business concept. And when I'm talking about the business concept, I'm not talking about the corporate personality. I'm talking about how that organization or company creates its money. So changes in the external environment will require businesses that want to continue to essentially have a relook at their strategy and their model of engagement in order to survive. Dinosaurs got extinct, Human beings continue. Yet, so if you don't adapt your business model to the present, to the realities of the changes in your external environment, yes, you will die. You will certainly die. And that is talking about the business concept. So if an organization acquires another organization, it acquires the business of that organization. They are distinct. Perhaps Professor Samoa might touch on that a bit later. So maybe we could say that as you have the convergence of banking industry and the telecoms industry, some might say banks are destined to die, but you need to look at what is the business of that bank. What is the business concept? Not so much as the corporate personality of that bank. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. So thank you.
Thank you very much, very good friend, Prosper. You've taken the life cycle off. I just want to draw attention to something. This looks linear, as if there is a termination point. But businesses rejuvenate themselves. We can take the case of ExxonMobil, Total. You've gone back, okay. Oh, okay.
I'm helping you.
Actually, I was going to talk about this because at every point in time, if you are in the growth stage, and there is any element within, and you see the business sees that it is going to the slow death stage. If the business does not react by merging with the concepts elucidated earlier by the first speaker,
Julius.
Julius, merger, acquisition, injection, capital, etc., you will by all means die. But many businesses actually, when they get to maturity, they don't just, if you want to stay alive, you have to keep afloat. Some of them will jettison, if it's a product line, they will either rebrand or do something new to regenerate the business, to maintain themselves to be in the growth state. So it looks linear, but it's like it looks something like this. As you are going, you have to find something to wake you up, to get back on track, and that kind of thing. And then you can live 100 years, we don't do the next. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I think there are a lot of experts in the room. Please, let's give him one round. And I think he just nailed it on the head. Basically, that was going to be my next point. There's room for a business going downward to revive. The whole idea is every business exists at a point in time. You can look at it even if it's a spread of time to address specific issues. And these issues are called the needs of the market. And these needs will change over time. And so when it changes and your business model does not change, you would go downward. So basically, I think my good friend has handled it. But one thing I want to say here is there are core variables. Earlier on I was talking about how to determine where a business is based on certain variables. These variables behave differently at various stages in a business's life. So at the beginning of a business, revenue is very low. You barely have cash, barely make any profit. Well, but that in itself is not reason to conclude on whether a business is failing or not. Facebook had an IPO when it wasn't even making profit. So these are examples of businesses at the early stage struggling, but their situation cannot be put in the same basket of, for example, a matured business struggling. Now, whether or not the cash line, cash is not the same, revenue is not the same as cash and profit. And cash is not the same as profit. I think Julius did a lot of work on, defining his solvency and all that. I wouldn't go into it. But whether or not your cash line falls below the profit or above is dependent on how you run your business, the kind of mechanisms you have in place, and whether the gap between the profit and the cash line is also dependent on the nature of the industry you are in. Certain industries have huge cash lines, others don't. So let's bear this in mind. The next thing I want to touch on is the need for capital. Now, every business really needs to define or answer the capital question. And what typically happens is anytime a business tries to grow, automatically there'll be a capital gap. That's what happens all the time. So we can take it from the beginning. Before a business comes into existence, it will need capital. Now, if the business operates at one level and tries to transition, there will be that capital gap again. And at every point in time, the business must figure out how to deal with this capital issue. And the decision around dealing with the capital issue brings in the concept of capital structure. So businesses must decide the two main brackets, be it debt or equity, how to figure out the capital issue. But the interesting thing about this is it's not all dependent on the business. It's not all within the capacity of the business to decide how its capital structure will be per se. And that introduces the concept of what I call the business risk line. Do we have bankers here? Any bank here? All the banks are gone. Oh, yeah, yeah. From any credit department? Credit? So you guys are my friends. So I'll need you at some point. I have a question. So this is how it plays out. When a business starts, the red line there, that is where the risk is at the highest. And then as the business begins to prove its business model, risk begins to decline. Now, capital behaves differently on this line. There's one bracket of capital that doesn't seem to move that much. That's your equity line. There are different sources of equity at every stage in the business life cycle. Right from the beginning, I'm not addressing raising capital here, so I'm not going into the types of capital, but right at the beginning, you have shareholders, funds, and all that coming in. You have family and friends coming in. Equity is there if you can raise it. No matter how, excuse me to say, dumb the idea is, you can find an investor. It could be your uncle. It could be a relative. Then as you go up the life cycle, the other equity, both private and public sources, that become available. But interestingly, this is how debt behaves. Debt has an inverse relationship with the business risk line. So, please, the bankers here, we've heard the stories about banks don't fund startups. Is it true? And then they get upset. And they say the banks are not supporting the economy. If you don't invest in startups, then what happens? Please, if any banker can speak to perhaps any reason, bitter experience of giving to a startup, or why banks don't give to a startup. I know there are regulatory issues in there, but if any bank can speak to it, I'll be very glad. But really, this is the reason. I personally don't fault the banks. I have zero issues with the banks when it comes to this, because when you understand the wider bracket of capital and you understand the business risk line, you kind of figure out why the banks take that position.
Yeah, Prosper.
Yes.
So what I can say is for commercial banks, our source of funding is a bit short term. So whatever business we intend to do has to focus on the short term perspective in terms of returns. So in that respect, it will be quite difficult for us to fund startups because the uncertainties are quite wide, and it becomes difficult to account for it to our short-term lenders or short-term investors.
Thank you. Please, your name and I think your name and...
Samuel from Stanbic Bank.
Okay, Samuel. Yeah, any other contribution? I think I saw a couple of hands from the banks. But I think what Samuel said is really what I've said. If there's anything to take away from this slide, I would say let us understand the banks in the funding model they operate. When the risk is very high, lenders don't tend to come in. And really, the reason for this is because of the characteristics of debt. There are two things about debt that makes this quite critical. One is debt always has a fixed term. No matter how you look at it, you have to pay back at some point. That is not the nature of equity. So for debt, there's always a duration, and then you have to pay back. So where the business risk is high, and you can't sort of figure out the business model, the nature of your cash flows, it is very, very difficult for lenders to come in. That is why debt builds up as you go up the life cycle. And so as we are here dealing with the subject of insolvency and restructuring, really the issue begins to build up when companies tend to grow. That is where the whole point is, because there isn't really any debt market for young businesses. That is the fact. There are other capital avenues for young businesses. I'm not saying that young businesses cannot borrow at all. I'm just speaking about the wider body of knowledge when it comes to this. Just because of the way debt functions, businesses need to understand where they are and therefore the type of debt available to them. Now, that brings me to the next bit I want to address. So this is a little universe of, I'm not going to go into equity, I'm going to focus on debt, and I'll just touch on this briefly. Yes, debt exists, but like someone said earlier, banks tend to give short-term credit and all, but the whole idea is that anytime a business, as I mentioned earlier, anytime a business tries to grow, there's need for capital. Now, a business growing that is reliant on debt may have to decide, or not may, but would have to decide how it approaches debt and the questions that it answers with debt. Now, the business would typically, for growth, you need to invest. I think Julius spoke about give and take. You have to invest in growth. And this investment is typically captured in capital expenditure, right? Now, but long-term debt is the best solution for capital expenditure. But there are also short-term requirements. For example, when you are into, say, juice manufacturing, you decide to increase your capacity from 100 bottles a day to 1,000 bottles a day. You tend to increase your factory floor, your equipment, so on and so forth. All these are equipment. And you need to make some capital expenditure for this purpose. The moment you do this, you'd realize that you start having short-term liquidity gaps. Why? Because perhaps you used to just order 100 pineapples for your production. Now you order 1,000 pineapples. So your payables shoot up, and you have to figure out how to meet that short-term requirement. So what often happens is that when a business tries to grow and takes on more debt by way of capital expenditure, at the same time, there's a gap that is created when it comes to short-term funding. And what is really important is how businesses carry out this allocation. Now, the misalignment of this can cause serious problems. The bankers here, I don't work in a bank, but they'll tell you some businesses buy Land Cruisers from their overdraft. Am I right? Yeah, you buy Land Cruiser from your overdraft. What's going to happen? That's a short-term debt solution, investing in a capital expenditure item. So what is going to happen is you're going to run dry. First and foremost, short-term credit is way more expensive than long-term. So your cost is going to shoot up, and you're going to have problems. Do you any questions or contributions at this point? The banks, I'm doing your work for you, so if you can.
Thank you. My name is Sharif, and I'm from KPMG and PMO. Regards to this graph, I just want to find out that is it possible that at the maturity stage of a business, the risk will become zero, because that's the sense I get from this graph. Yeah. Is that possible? That at some point, the risk that a business faces will become totally zero? Thank you.
That's a good question. I mean, this is relative. So I think earlier on we tackled the issue of matured businesses. My brother from PwC mentioned that Coca-Cola, for example, is quite mature, doing well, existed all these years. Now, we can't have a thing such as zero risk. We've been in the government situation. You know, we say risk-free, and now we are all hit. You know, so we can't really have zero risk. However, we can assume that at some level, risk is at its barest minimum. Okay, so I'm not going to, I just try to address some few, I'm running out of time, so let me just speed it up. So these are just some few sources of debt. I'm sure you are all aware of this. Two brackets, private debt markets and public debt markets. Private debt markets looks at all the bank, private debt funds, finance houses and all that. Then you look at the public debt market where you look at bonds and all that. So this is just a quick one. The next key thing I want to tackle is debt capacity. I think when Julius was handling his session, he did mention, he said something along the lines of how a business decides to borrow. I don't quite remember the specifics, but really there's a concept called debt capacity. And the debt capacity of a business is defined at a point in time, but interestingly, it is not static. That is the whole idea of debt capacity. And there isn't any standard formula per se, but really debt capacity is what can you take and pay. And when you're answering the question of what can you take, it's not just in volume, what can you also cover in terms of security. Okay, so there are some key considerations you have to look at in defining your debt capacity. Are we okay with this? So I think, like I mentioned earlier, one of the key things to bear in mind is debt capacity changes over time. So debt capacity today, the basis on which a certain credit was provided, may change. And that is why businesses get into trouble sometimes, because the debt capacity has changed. So what influences debt capacity? A number of things, internal and external factors. Really, that is what influences whether or not a business stays afloat. So I have some few factors here for internal issues and external issues. I know, interestingly, most Ghanaian business tend to be very, well, from my experience, not Ghanaian businesses, but we Ghanaians tend to be quite religious and spiritual. I quite remember I have a client where we did a deal for in the region of 20 million, and then COVID hit. And I called the client and I said, look, there's COVID, and from our analysis, it's going to hit you. What should we do? Should we start talking to the banks because you are exposed? He said, oh, you don't have faith. You don't believe. I said, no, this is serious. He said, you sit there and think that, oh, your analysis and all your computer language. He said, come to where I am and see. We pray. Yeah, but this is the reality, you know. So, yeah, there are a number of factors that influence debt capacity. We saw a threat to the debt capacity, so we tried to reach out to the client. And this is depicted here. So the bank or lenders will give a loan and they have an expected performance. Then over time, external and internal factors may influence the business. And you see the debt capacity go downward. And what it does is that it creates a hole. So this line is called the corporate demise curve. And you see debt capacity going down, whilst expected performance is at a certain level. So this is just an introduction of the the corporate demise curve, which is better explained here, where you see a business move through the stages from growth to underperformance, and then it gets stress, distress, and then gets into crisis. And like all what Julius tried to handle in his session, manage the issue of crisis and then possibly come out of crisis. Now, like my good client, who is still in business today by the grace of God, it's quite interesting to know how it happens to businesses. So this is also the corporate demise curve, but this particular here tries to depict how businesses relate to it. So on the left is the business. Now, when COVID hit, I reached out to my clients and I said, hey, the macro environment is changing. You better watch out. Let's engage the lenders. Because he was comfortable, he was in trouble, but he was not aware. So he was okay. He didn't have any knowledge of external factors coming for his business. Then the next stage is in trouble and taking control. So in this same situation, I'm sure if he's listening to me, he will just stone me after here. But anyway, this client reached out to us and said, look, the COVID thing is for real. It's hitting me seriously. So can we engage the lenders? And I said, yes, why not? So we started a process of engaging the lenders, basically revising cash flows, doing some impact analysis on the numbers in order to justify the case. So, thank you. Yeah. So, we were able to handle it, and that was a situation of taking control whilst you're in trouble. But if we go past that stage, which I've also experienced with this whole COVID situation as well, you can totally lose control, where it gets worse, and that's a crisis stage, and then you eventually would have to need business rescue. If not, you go down the drain. So I conclude by just touching on some key considerations in debt management. One, proper allocation of capital is important. Earlier on, I spoke about the fact that you may misalign your long-term needs and your short-term needs. Debt structure is also crucial. Reason being that you need a proper structure in your debt to be able to service it well. For example, if you're in construction, you need 24 months to build a commercial property, and then you have your tenants coming in, and you take a loan without any other source of income. That requires you to start paying after 3 months. You are bound to get in trouble. So the structure of the debt is quite important. Monitoring of debt indicators. There are some few indicators. When a business takes on debt, sometimes they assume it is the responsibility of the bank to monitor the indicators. But the finance department or the company must also keep eye on some key indicators. For example, there's the debt service coverage ratio that shows the business's ability to meet the obligations. I think these things have to be looked at. We've had a few clients who have to, help in that regard. And then, being realistic with cash flows. A lot of businesses, particularly in our jurisdiction, where businesses are SME and led by few individuals, if not an individual, who have a lot of faith and believe in God, they tend to be very optimistic with their cash flows. And then the business model. A business model is basically how a business makes money. How the business operates in order to create value. You have to constantly look at the business model. Whether or not the business model is relevant, what are the changing dynamics in the market, and what you can do to stay afloat. The last bit is openness with lenders. I think that's the last bit. I always encourage businesses to be open with lenders, because the lenders, to be very honest, they can't do anything anyway, because they are in the same boat with you. I think most banks have what we call relationship management, because it's assumed to be a relationship. So if you are open with lenders and you are true from the beginning, it's very easy when your dynamics are changing to engage lenders. So ladies and gentlemen, this is my little bit on the business life cycle and debt implications. Thank you. Any questions, contributions?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if I heard you right. You said that any time that the debt is going to increase, it's going to have a toll on your liquidity, or there will be a pressure on your repayment ability. Now, if that were to be true, then right from the word go, you are having crisis. What we do as bankers is that if upon the debt going up, if it is not commensurate with the income that you are going to generate, so as to pay us, then we will not, right from the word go, even consider, or we will decline the request, the debt that you are increasing. So I just want you to throw more light as to either, is it the case that anytime the debt is going to grow, that is going to have a challenge on the liquidity, as you said? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If your name and I think.
Oh, I'm called Justice.
Okay, Justice.
Yes, sir.
So, Justice, this is with the assumption that debt is held constant. There's no growth in debt. So this is basically saying that if debt is given at a certain point in time, there's a certain level of expected performance. If the dynamics of the market begin to change, it will influence debt capacity. It has nothing to do with the bank. It's to do with the business and its ability to service that debt. So then it creates a gap. I hope that's the case of Ghana, as well. We had certain assumptions and parameters around macro performance. We couldn't keep up. Debt performance lines, if you hold it constant and the dynamics change, there'll be a hole.
I don't think that if Ghana had invested, I don't think that we would have got it to where we were. But we just borrowed to chop. Yeah. That's the case. We didn't invest to generate a commensurate expenditure. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you. As for Ghana, we'll talk later.
Let's give Prosper a hand. Let's give Prosper a hand. The next presentation is on restructuring proper. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Michael Asamoah. He is specialist in finance, and what he's going to do is he's going to take us through restructuring, and that will give you context to what was discussed earlier in the morning and indeed Prosper's session.
Okay. My name is Michael and I teach. So I apply my trade, University of Ghana, and then I do some Galamsey because the money is not enough. So I do Galamsey at Ashesi and then Lancaster, and I've seen one of my Ashesi students here. It's impressive to know that your teacher is still working doing Galamsey. All right, so we are looking at financial restructuring and business reorganization. So as a teacher, you always have to give, students will not read it, so you have to give them detailed slides. So if you see that, I have a lot of slides looking at you like my students. Okay. So we are looking at restructuring, and from the onset go, we just want to break it down that we want to restructure, which means that there's something in place, and then we want to actually redo it again. So to redo it again, and then we want to construct what was actually there. So the business will have to rearrange its things, rebuild internal structure, bring efficiency, and then competitiveness. Okay. Now, when we want to restructure, you should know that there are a lot of players in the system. So the business has a contract with a lot of people. There are shareholders, there are debtors, there are other stakeholders. So if there's need for restructure, it cannot just be the business alone. You have to consider all these guys. Okay, so in restructuring, you are seeking to rearrange or re-exchange or change these contracts to create value. We want to create value for the players involved in the corporate typical setting. Okay. So why should we restructure? You have to first, what is the fundamental problem to be solved? If there's no problem to be solved, then there's nothing to restructure about. So if there's a problem, then we have to do that. How do we go about it? We want to create or preserve value and negotiate how the gains are distributed. When do we restructure? Well, most people would think that you have to restructure once there's distress, but you can do a preemptive approach. You can do a preemptive approach before the distress comes. And then in trying to implement the restructuring, you have to need the consent of all stakeholders involved to get it going. So why restructure? Before restructuring, of course, you know that there are a lot of indicators that will talk about the performance of the entity. So if you go by a typical ratio analysis, indicators of profitability, coverage, solvency, that will tell you that there's something to be done and there's something you have to do. It tells you whether the corporate is fragile or not. So high levels of capital expenditure combined with poor performance will give you an indication that, well, you have to now seek to go and restructure. In many cases, a business will restructure with the aim of becoming more profitable, better than what it used to be. Now, as I said, it is not only for struggling organizations. A firm can be proactive. You can be proactive in whatever that you actually do, so that before the forces come, you can actually cater for that. Yesterday in the business school, we had some meeting with some of the, one bank came to do some donation to the business school, and what we requested we didn't get, but the manager was of the view that, well, for their bank, their partners realized some 5 years ago that there would be something wrong with government bonds. So about 5 years ago, they restricted them from what? Investment, or they capped their investment. So that is the preemptive action before the distress comes. Okay. Now, once a business is financially restructured, its value is enhanced as it gives the business a new image in the eyes of its investors. That is what we are seeing. Okay. When to restructure? The restructuring process can be at various stages of the firm's life. So mostly at the time of promotion or incorporation of a company. So as Prosper was saying, it's a startup. So you have family, few friends, you decide to come together. Now you think the business has prospects. Okay, so initially you just have your friends. But if you decide to go public, then you have to what? You have to change the dynamics. So a restructuring will actually come in. So not necessarily that you are failing, but at that point in time, there is a step that you have to take, or you are going to a higher domain. So you need to do that. At the time of expansion of an existing company, at the time of amalgamation or absorption of a new company, and then when what you need or capital for the company. So that is at the point that we can take on a restructuring. Okay. Now, what is involved in the restructuring? Please, if you have a question, you can actually ask. Okay. So the restructuring involves fixing the business. So you have to fix the business. And here, we are looking at dealing with the business risk. When we talk about business risk, we are looking at the risk that is inherent in the operations of the business. Inherent in the operations of the business. So when Prosper asks that, can there be a point where the business has no risk? Once the business is existing, the nature of the business alone poses what? Risk. Once you're a bank, there's a risk that whatever you do, even the church can default. So that is that. So the business risk, you have to fix it as part of what you're restructuring. Okay. Now, business risk could come from, look at your sales volume, look at your proportion of what fixed cost and all those ones. So you look at the variability of your sales in relation to changes in what the economic output. You can also fix your finances. And here we decide to focus on operating what finances. Okay, so the recurring expenditures that you have to actually make. And then look at fixing your ownership or control. So here we look at the capital structure of the organization, looking at the mix between debt and then what? Equity at some point in time. Then create or preserve value. You have to create or preserve value. So what is expected from the process? What is expected from the process? Does reconstructed company have a good chance of what? Surviving? If there's no chance of surviving, then you just have to let the ship sink. So you have to do that analysis before what you begin. Okay. So it looks like it's very simple, but is it simple to do reconstruction? No, it's never simple. We said that there are players in the system. So there are debtors, there are your suppliers are there, those who give you capital, even the governments and then the environment. There are times you want a business to just survive because of what? The environment where it finds itself. So it's not easy that you want to undertake what? A restructuring. So there are many roadblocks that you are likely to face. Some can be regulatory. So you know that with the Companies Act, there are a lot of things that you have to seek permission from shareholders at extraordinary meetings, some at general meetings and stuff. So it's not easy for you to say that you want to restructure because we are directors. You need to get that regulatory backing. Then you also have the cost of going to restructure. There's a cost that you have to consider. The lack of information asymmetry. Mostly, as we see, managers have all the information, and mostly you need all of us involved, but they try to withhold information. Why are we restructuring? Oh, let's restructure. Do you understand? You go to your financiers, I want to restructure. Manager, why? And I think we just have to restructure. So once they withhold information, it becomes difficult for the other person to actually come on board. Then you consider the general macroeconomic environment. If you decide to restructure this time, who will support you? It might be very difficult to get somebody to do that. And then again, you look at the confidence of what? Your investors. Okay, so if your banks call you that, please, we are going to restructure, what will you do? You quickly go for your money because you don't know what comes. So it also have to do with the investors' confidence. Okay, so that is basically generally looking at the business reorganization and then whether you have to do that restructuring. So if you look at financial restructuring itself, then here you are looking at rearranging the financial structure, ownership or control to avoid liquidation of the company. Okay. Now the aim is to provide value to the providers of capital, and we can do this as I gave you the stages where we can actually do the restructuring, acquisition, mergers, leverage buyout, divestiture. All those ones are means that you can do that. That is that. Okay. Now when it comes to capital restructuring, we are looking at debt and equity restructuring. Debt and equity restructuring. And once these are the causes that there have been some misappropriation of funds, or funds have been used not for the intended purposes, lack of optimization of resources, inefficient management, then other external factors which the firm do not have control. These ones can push you into what? Some financial restructuring. So you know what mergers are, and then also there's divestiture where we decide to actually buy. Now once you want to do financial restructuring, they should take you to the concept of what? Capital structure. So we all know that capital structure is the means by which we finance the firm. We can do a mixture of what? Debt and then equity. And managing your capital structure is one of the key functions of the financial manager because they come at a cost. So you want to know what is the cost of what? Equity, and then what is the cost of debt before you decide to do the restructuring. It can also expose the business to financial risk and the incidence of what? Restructuring. The key aspects that look at the potential financial restructuring, that you have to look at your capital structure itself. Now, capital structure is not in vacuum, okay? So what are some of the things that you should actually consider? We call them the views of capital structure. And these tell us theoretically what are the factors that influence capital structure, or what are capital structure really around. So they explain the various conceptions of what capital structure should actually be. Now, based on earlier studies, if you want to look at the capital structure debate, you want to look at what the perfect market view that influence of capital structure. That there's a choice between debt and equity. But if the world is in a perfect market, which I'm sure after they propounded that view, they've actually dropped it. Then here at that point, there's no cost, there's no difference between financing your firm with debt or equity, because there's no financing cost. So that is a perfect world. Okay. Then we have the corporate tax view. That's basically the benefit of tax deductibility makes finance a very better option when it comes to equity. Equity does not have any tax benefit. But once you finance your firm with debt, you're going to enjoy those tax benefits. So you see, if you find yourself in a higher tax bracket, then you can actually go for debt. Then the benefit that comes from the corporate tax view might be eroded by the personal tax view. Okay, so in the personal tax view, once the firm be able to make some savings, they pay you some dividend. But because of your personal tax bracket that you find yourself, you're likely to pay that dividend in the form of what taxes. So you look at your personal tax bracket, and then, or in this case, you look at the investors who want to look at where they are. If they are in a higher tax bracket, they will prefer that the firm should what? Reinvest and give them what? Capital gains. And then we look at the agency cost view, that there is an agency cost which looks at monitoring both the providers of capital. So we have to, shareholders have to monitor management to see that they are using their resources well. Again, debt providers must also monitor management to see that they can get their money back. So you weigh which of them is less costly. If the monitoring cost from debt is cheaper, then you want to go for debt. And then based on the bankruptcy view, we know what happens in bankruptcy. When you are in bankrupt, you are likely or you are supposed to try to settle your debt towards providers. Equity will have to just pack their things and go home. So because of the likelihood of bankruptcy and the fact that the firm will have to make those payments, full debt financing is not the option. Full debt financing is not the option. And the last is the pecking order theory or the pecking order view, that we should finance looking at what? The least cost to resistance, which is very cheap and easier for you to access. And we have seen that, well, if you have some internally generated funds and you have positive NPV projects, you don't need to give these monies out as dividend. You can decide to recoup them as means of capital, and then debt becomes what? Cheaper than what? Equity. So in that pecking order, you want to look at your IGF, your debt, and then what? If you need more capital, you can go for equity. Okay. Now, you should also have a target capital structure, which looks at the blend of debt and equity, which the firm plans to finance what? Its investments. Okay. Now that is basically used as a guide in making your financing decisions. So the target one is that what is the proportion of debt and equity that I actually want. Again, aside the cost that comes with debt and equity, there are other things that can also what? Influence your capital structure.